This webinar is the sixth one in our webinar series as part of our research project titled Indian Coastal Think Tank Network, supported by Asia Foundation, New Delhi. Indian Coastal Think Tank Network, or ICTN as we call it, aims to create a network of coastal think tanks focused on policy driven analysis of issues in India's coastal region from local, regional, and national perspectives. We have nine different experts joining us in this network from different think tanks and institutions across coastal states in India, focusing on the following themes. The first one is climate change and gender. The second, coastal security. Blue economy is the third one. Fourth one is the fisheries. Fifth is on coastal ecology. Sixth one is on tourism. Seventh on maritime domain awareness. Eighth on ports and shipping. Ninth one is in disaster management. Tenth is in coastal energy. And the final one is coastal heritage. For today's webinar, our area of discussion is coastal ecology and tourism. As we all know, coastal ecology is an integral part of the coastal ecosystem as it is biologically diverse and economically valuable. Coastal ecosystems provide critical functions such as carbon sequestration, fisheries, serving as habitats for various species, and protection from storm surges. At the same time, these areas attract millions of tourists drawn to their pristine beaches, coral reefs, and cultural heritage sites, thereby supporting livelihoods of many in the coastal region. However, this rise in tourism creates significant ecological challenges, including habitat destruction, pollution, and biodiversity loss. It's therefore crucial to balance the preservation of ecosystem with the growth of tourism for long-term sustainable development. So, this webinar aims to explore the relationship between tourism and ecology in coastal areas, focusing on the importance of finding a middle ground between ecological conservation and tourism. Ecological conservation is particularly crucial in the face of climate change and its vulnerabilities, as the ecology of coastal areas plays a pivotal role in supporting ecosystems. Recognizing the value of each ecosystem and is fundamental for sustainable tourism development, and tourism must be aligned with sensitivities of coastal ecologies. The panel will discuss innovative approaches to tourism, such as ecotourism, community-based tourism, and cultural tourism, and how can these approaches drive sustainable development for both ecology and local communities. Local communities in coastal areas can play a pivotal role in ensuring that ecological conservation and tourism activities coexist harmoniously. Their active engagement decision-making process is essential to ensure the best practices and local knowledge are effectively shared and implemented. The strategies for the same shall be explored further through our discussion today. And before we get into the conversation, I would like to introduce to our esteemed panelists for the day. We are truly honored to have with us distinguished expert and leader in the field of coastal and marine environmental sustainability, Dr. Shirji Kurup. Dr. Shirji Kurup is the program director at the Center of Environment Education and serves as a national operator for the International Blue Flag Beach Award program in India. With a PhD in marine sciences, he brings deep academic insight along with decades of practical experience to the complex and critical domain of coastal management. At CE, he led several key initiatives related to coastal and marine programs, disaster risk reduction, policy advocacy around coastal regulation zone, and fostering community engagement through public consultations. His research is particularly inspiring, focus on nurturing beaches as place-based environmental learning sites and strengthening systems for sustainability in tourism destination. With such a rich background and ongoing commitment to environmental education and action, we are excited to hear his insight and experience today. Dear sir, I welcome you to this webinar. And to join in the conversation, I'm honored to introduce a speaker whose work lies at the powerful intersection of law, environmental justice, and community empowerment, Ms. Naina Udeshankar. Naina is currently the Senior Program Officer, Communities and Resource Governance, and she brings with her nearly a decade of impactful experience in the field of environmental governance and justice. Formerly trained as a litigating lawyer, she earned her law degree from Gujarat National Law University in 2011. Between 2016 and 2021, She was part of Equitable Tourism Options Equations, where she brought a critical development lens to the world of tourism. She led research, supported local governance systems, advocated for policy change, and worked on strengthening the right of local communities across landscapes as diverse as coastal areas, protected reserves, and mountain regions. She has also contributed to thought leadership and collaborative research on the evolving concept on blue economy, ensuring that ecological sustainability and equity remain central to its discussion. It's a privilege to have with us here today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ms. Naina Udeshankar.
Thank you.
Before we dive into today's insightful discussion, it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, a distinguished scholar and global thought leader in the field of climate policy and international relations, Dr. Dhansri Jairam. Dr. Dhansri is a senior assistant professor in the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations and co-coordinator of the Center for Climate Studies at Manipal Academy of Higher Education, India. Her academic and professional engagements span across continents, institutions, and disciplines, making her uniquely equipped to guide today's dialogue. She is affiliated with several renowned institutions globally, including her roles as research fellow at the Center for Public Policy Research, the Earth System Governance Network, and the Climate Security Expert Network. Her research areas span environmental and climate security, climate diplomacy, environmental geopolitics, particularly in Southern Asia, the Indo-Pacific, and the polar regions, as well as gender and climate governance and geopolitical dimensions of solar geoengineering. With her vast expertise and global perspective, we are truly fortunate to have Dr. Dhansri guiding and moderating today's conversation. Please join me in warmly welcome our moderator, Dr. Dhansri Jayara.
Thank you so much.
I would like to remind the viewers that you can put your questions in the YouTube comment box, which we'll be taking up towards the end of our session. So yeah, we can start our webinar discussion today. Over to you, Dr. Dhansri Jairam.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jofi, and welcome to the two esteemed speakers for this webinar, Dr. Sriji Kurup and Ms. Nayana Udeshankar. Jofi has already set the stage for the discussion and covered, a wide range of issues that we can look at. And of course, unpacking these issues would be important because coastal tourism is something, it's very important part of, India's economy and everything, but yet this is not an issue that is often discussed within the purview of coastal governance as much as some of the other issues which come up. So I'm very glad that CPPR has taken this issue as a specific area of focus for this webinar series and for the ongoing research as part of this project with the Asia Foundation. So kudos to CPPR first of all for doing this. So let me start by requesting Dr. Kurup and also Naina just briefly explain the impacts of coastal tourism on marine ecosystems, coastal biodiversity, because all of these are not just restricted to ecological or environmental effects. It has a broader socio-economic effects because it has knock-on effects on livelihood societies and many others who are dependent on the coastal ecosystems as such. And as Jofi already mentioned, coastal tourism is on the rise. And, we need to look at these impacts in a more systematic manner in order to address them through policy and regulatory intervention. So maybe we should start with that. Dr. Kurup, could you reflect on this and then Naina can, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Dhansri, and thanks CPPR too for bringing this all together. Now, Dhansri, that the basic thing when we call about impacts, I think, and then we contextualize it in terms of the tourism-related impacts, and especially on the Indian coastline. I think to me, I can bring about what I've seen and perceived from our work experiences on the field. One, of course, as it was already pointed out, is a major loss. I wouldn't say even destruction, it's a loss of habitats. And that loss is something that perhaps only the earlier generations felt. And that is how I would like to put the impact. Who feels the impact the most? Who feels the sense of loss the most? It would not be our future generations. It would always be the previous generation who has seen those things being lost right in front of their eyes. Perhaps that becomes also the motivation of why we should start conservation. Now, let me come back to something which are very, very obvious right in front of our eyes. We are losing it, yet we are not very much so maybe very evident to us, or it might not be striking to us. And this I say not only in terms of the tourism aspect, there are multiple factors. But of course, when we look at from tourism point of view, one of the tremendous losses that we might really be actually happening is the beach space itself. The perception that we have on a beach is that it just has to be a sandy beach. That's all. That if I go to the coast, I look at the sand and I believe that there is a beach. Perhaps the road that you were actually traveling on could have been a sand dune, a secondary sand dune on which that could have been there. There could have been flattened sand dunes which we no longer know exists. And therefore, the first part that is so obvious where we can touch, we can, feel it, is the beach space. I'm sure that most of us would have seen, at least over the last 5 years, several spaces which we have lost. Just that the water would have come in and inundated. Now, that is the impact, but that could be something. I mean, a lot of things could have been around, but the point is that a popular tourist spot or a spot which had attracted people has now lost its beach space. So one is that sense of loss, I would say, and it's not just people or coming in. One factor for it could be especially our unplanned developmental manner. I mean, we build our homes, we take so much care to see how the design comes, as going up to the extent of vastu and all. So how does these public spaces need to emerge? I think that is something we all need to look into. That is one part. The second is what actually happens to those ecology. Now, how many of us really think about the crabs? We do eat those shell things, but how many crab holes do we see on the beach? That is a real indicator of the health of the beach. How many do we really want them? How much of the beach do we really feel when we walk on the beach side? Is it a paved concrete or a granite surface? No, so those are the impacts that we are feeling, but we might not be registering it as a loss of habitat. That's the first space I would like to see. And when I say habitat, coastal habitat, what is the boundary? What is the space that we are looking at? On the marine side, it could be as far into the coral reefs, much ahead, as far as where even I would say the traditional fishers move in. It could be the island spaces itself. It could be also all the tremendous water bodies. On the shore, we are very conscious about the beach, but then there are a lot of water bodies, the river fronts, the estuaries, the mud flats. Even I would say 50-kilometer inland from a shore, we should consider it as a coastal space. It is definitely a coastal space, technically also. So this is the extent on which the impacts can be seen. And ecologically, when we see who are the losers, we will see in nature the endemic species or the specific species we start losing. And it could be very much dependent on that coastal environment, that dependency on the tides, the weather, and so forth. And it's the entire web of life that is getting disrupted. And if we are quite sensitive, I think it will happen. And then coming back from habitat loss, I would come back to the loss of biodiversity. It is quite aligned. But what are the coastal vegetation? Let's take a simple question of what can I name 5 native vegetation on my beach, which I used to see 5 years before, or it was always existing. For example, the ipomia, sandbinders, creepers, which we see. Many of the perception that it is an unwanted species, it is just growing wild and it has to be removed. But that is where we are losing, and those are gifted by nature. It is very unique to tropical environments. That is, I think, a very important biodiversity, which is so obvious to us, but we don't feel that sense of loss. Similarly, would be a lot of tree vegetation, the pandanus and all. But on the coast, we would see a lot of casuarina trees. Now, the point is that really native vegetation that we have? It might have been coming in terms of a bioshield concept or something introduced concept. But the biodiversity loss is also in the terms of tourism beautification projects, where we want to have, say, you would see these bottleneck palm trees and all. It looks good, great. But then what is the promotion for native vegetation, which is something even the local traditional knowledge exists. So we are not only losing the habitat, we are losing the knowledge space around it. And that's where the sense is. And third, I would like to put is on the pollution itself. Pollution, in terms of, say, the marine waters. We go into a swimming pool, we are very cautious about what is the water quality there. Yeah, but are we so conscious when it comes to our marine waters? I look into the Blue Flag program nationally, and one of the aspects is to look at the bathing waters. What is the water quality? What is the bacterial and other microbiological parameters? If we have something like that, perhaps what we would be really impacted is from pollution. We might be very frightened to see some of the figures that might be existing along the coastline or the near shore waters. So pollution and the source also, we are very familiar now with marine litter. And I want to just dwell a point on that is the who is the actual, I would not say the blaming game here, but when we say marine litter, it's all those unmanaged plastics or other waste which we could have done it at the right place, which takes us to the point of behavioral aspect. So a lot of things impacts that we see on the coast is a direct manifestation of the tourism behavior. And when I say that, it includes myself also. It includes visitors, it includes the systems itself. Behavior is something I think if we can focus on, it's something like how do we behave when we are at homes? That's it. The simple narrative of considering the beach space or coastal space as part of your home, that ownership space itself would be a great thing. And in that sense, I would say the coastal communities have a deeper connection with it. When you see festivals associated with it, when you see reverence to the seas for this scene in India, and therefore we have that rich base. And I think that also gets impacted. So I just summarize that habitat destruction, pollution, and biodiversity loss as the key areas we do it. And then it has different levels, the boundaries being right from the marine to inland, and even the islands itself. But these are tremendous spheres where tourism has a major impact and can also impact it positively. I'm just dwelling on I mean the lower side. There are positive impacts also, but I think as the conversation moves ahead, we can bring in those aspects too. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Naina, would you like to add anything to this? Yes.
Yeah, I don't think I can describe the environmental impacts any better. I think for the sake of this conversation, I'd like to bring another aspect into mind, which is the cascading effects these kind of environmental impacts has on the lives and livelihoods of those communities that occupy the coast. And here, I would fully echo with the sentiment Dr. Kurup has said, which is that beaches are often visualized as vast empty spaces, and this is something that I think for tourists it's that picture postcard kind of image, right? Like it's an empty beach and it is for tourism, but um it's contrary to popular belief. The beaches are highly populated spaces, and if I look at some of the numbers, they are home to about 3288 marine fishing villages, and that sums up to about 4 million people living on the beach. And this is a 2012 CMFRI census. I'm sure the numbers have changed drastically since then also, and they've grown. Like in every other place in India, population has grown. And these are resource dependent communities that are heavily dependent on the coastal and marine commons. And I call it commons for a reason, because it's often visualized and actually entered into a lot of our records as wastelands, but it's far from being wastelands. These are commons, and these are community commons. So when we have resource dependent communities who are they are the ones who bear the brunt of the habitat destruction, the loss of marine and coastal commons, a whole host of other things. And there's already and this is a rather tricky problem, a kind of a wicked problem, mostly because there is the tenurial security of marine small scale fishers is shaky as of today. And so when we are actually faced with a situation where fishers are losing their coastal commons, but without being backed up by secure rights. They are also do not have a way to talk about and raise these issues without it being a really uphill task. Just to give a couple of examples of how this kind of plays out, I'd like to bring about two examples from our work on the coast. One is, I'm sure everyone has heard of Rameshwaram. It's a very popular religious destination, but of late it's also been a nature-based tourism destination. So small-scale fisher communities in one small village that's right at the edge of the Rameshwaram island have been repeatedly raising this issue that their beach spaces, they're already faced with coastal erosion, so they're already seeing the loss of their beach space. And then we have an expanding tourism industry, and they have raised the issue of mushrooming of resorts and hotels along that road that have completely taken over their sandy beach spaces, which were previously very recently being used for fishing and allied livelihoods. The complexity of this problem, I think, also lies in the fact that outside of resource dependent communities like the small scale fishers communities, there is very little understanding of how the ecosystem of coastal and marine areas actually works, and how complex it is, and what is connected to what. And in a sense, the protection of these fragile relationships often falls on these communities who are also bearing the brunt of this loss. And for this, I would like to take the example of one small village. It's a part of Mumbai that feels very different from the rest of Mumbai. It's the Gorai, Manori, Uttan villages of the Dharavi island. It's again tucked away in one corner of Mumbai. And these are actually sleepy fishing villages in that area if you go there. And the fishing communities there have had a long and protracted legal battle to fighting the loss of their mangroves. So the islands are not just sandy beaches, they're also large, very important mangrove patches. And mangroves are the lifeline of fishers. And apart from also, of course, being protection measures against coastal erosion, etc., there are a host of other ecosystem services that mangroves have. But there is they were raising the issue of a water park that attracted, it's an amusement park, and it attracted a large number of weekend tourists and also local visitors who came in to enjoy the park. There was continuous water being diverted for the purposes of that water park, which was drying up the mangrove areas over a period of time. And it was really quite a battle for, and it took the legal course, and thankfully they got positive remedies for that. But it was quite a battle for the fishers to take up and be able to fight. So I think when we speak of what are the impacts of tourism, this is something that's not talked about as much. And it's, like I said again, it's also a very tricky uphill task, because the situation of the rights of small scale fishers is that shaky. So that's where I would like to bring in. And the funny part is, I think tourism also has the ability to transform societies, but that's something we can talk about later.
Thank you, Naina. So I'm having a problem as well with my laptop, so I've switched to the mobile. I hope that's okay. It doesn't seem to be a good, I don't know, day for Zoom meeting. But just to follow up on some of the things that you mentioned, and I think this is important when we are looking at the policy and regulatory landscape concerning tourism-related development in India. I mean, this includes like policies and regulations such as the coastal regulation zone. I think the point here is also like, who are the stakeholders who are, that we need to identify as part of, effective design and implementation of policies. And, to address all the challenges that you and also Dr. Kuru, both of you have outlined, so many different challenges concerning the ecological impacts, the legal battles that you mentioned, but also, the socio-economic impacts, and how even the framing of the, the coastal areas or islands seems to be, probably not in line with the kind of challenges that are there in terms of addressing them through these regulations. So, Naina, could you reflect a little bit upon this policy and regulatory landscape, and who are the stakeholders, and what is the kind of framing that we need to address the mounting challenges that we are seeing?
Yeah, so I think on the face of it, we actually have several legal provisions, and if you just read the text, that they can be quite effective. But I think what we are seeing is the implementation of it suffers on many counts. I will, because tourism is it's a cross-sectoral activity, and several things, there are several multiple actually legal frameworks that can come into play, but I will talk about the environmental frameworks. And I will speak about a few of them, which is, I think the most important is the Environment Protection Act. It's an umbrella legislation for environmental protection, and there are several notifications under this EPA that I think for tourism are very important. One, of course, is the Environment Impact Assessment. And very simply put, it is a notification that asks for any projects that you propose along any coast or anywhere in India, actually, as long as there are some projects that are mentioned in the annexures, some important industries, if you propose them along the coast, you have to get something called an environmental clearance. But the tricky bit here is there have been several dilutions to the environment impact assessment notification over the years. And if you look at the old 1994 notification, we actually had tourism as one of the industries that needed environmental clearance. It was a very clear, explicit ask from people who wanted to, industrialists who wanted to start any tourism project, they had to get an environmental clearance. But that was subsequently removed. And what stands as of today? We've had multiple notifications since then, and what we have today is a 2019 notification. In this notification, I'm very sorry. We have the 2000 notification right now. That I mixed it up with the CRZ year. Anyway, what we have today is that only projects that that have large built-up areas. And what does that mean? Built-up area that is more than 20,000 square feet, those have to go through environmental clearance procedures only. And that means a whole lot of other tourism projects are not actually being looked at from whether they impact the environment. Do we need to put in protection measures? Do we even allow these projects to come up so close to the coast, or like, is this okay? Like, none of that is actually being looked into. Basically, the scrutiny is not there. And there are also several other issues with the environmental impact notification itself, which it affects several other industries as well. And one of them is really the generality of mitigation measures and the terms of reference that are given. I would assume a project that comes in a hilly area versus a project that comes in a coastal area would have to have different mitigation measures. But what we see a lot is that there are standard TORs that are given according to the industry and not according to the context and the environmental sensitivity, which is actually what would be needed. The second is, so it becomes almost like a mere procedural formality. The second is the issues with public consultation. The public consultation can be a very powerful tool, and it's there within our law. But there are some issues. For instance, it's right at the end of the whole process of an environmental clearance, and the reports are put out in English. A lot of the document is mostly in English. The communities are not able to understand a lot of the text that's there because of technical language, and the participation of the public in this process is then not so effective unless it's really, really supported by a lot of other private actors in ensuring active participation. So I think these are some of the issues that need to be fixed with environment clearance procedures. And there is another very important legislation with respect to environmental protection of the coast, which is the Coastal Regulation Zone Notification, which is also another notification under the Environmental Protection Act. Now, this notification basically divides the coast into different zones, and it kind of tells you that in a certain zone you can only do certain kinds of certain kinds of activity, including developmental activity, and which also means that there are some sensitive zones which are given additional protection, like sand dunes or mangroves, etc., which are under the CRZ1. It is also the only legislation that has a mention of housing rights of fishers. So it is a very important legislation for fishers as well. But again, the CRZ notification has had several changes over the years. It's a notification that's been changed multiple times. And with respect to the latest 2019 notification, which is actually right now in place, we have seen several dilutions that have actually been at the instance of tourism. One example is reducing the no development zone from 200 meters to 50 meters to allow for ecotourism activities, which was previously not allowed under the previous notification. So, and this is something that in fact, the fisher collectives at the time when the 2019 draft CRZ was being circulated, it's an issue they raised repeatedly, that there are too many dilutions with respect to tourism, and this doesn't seem to be in the interest of the coast or its communities. I think these are some very critical issues that we need to look at. However, I also feel there are some other laws within our existing legal framework that actually have the potential for us to develop socially just and environmentally sustainable tourism. And I would like to bring our attention to the Biological Diversity Act. It is a legislation that seeks to protect the biodiversity of the country, and local communities are actually empowered to constitute something called a biodiversity management committee. This is a committee that sits under the panchayat, and they prepare biodiversity registers, which is basically an assessment of what biodiversity they're seeing in their jurisdiction. They are also empowered to make management plans and conservation plans for this kind of biodiversity. And it also allows you to levy a management fee when you think it's necessary. So there are a host of potential powers that can be used, actually have been used for other resource dependent communities like forest communities when they have done tourism initiatives, but I don't see a lot of this happening on the coast. Also, probably because biodiversity management committees in coastal panchayats, we don't see too many of them being constituted. And I think that's an area that we need to look at as a place where local communities can be empowered and the governance system can be empowered to address issues that come from tourism.
Yeah. Thank you. So, I mean, I was thinking about also the recent discussions on the National Adaptation Policy on climate change, which again tends to, I mean, of course, coastal areas are mentioned, but there's no specific sort of framing of coastal issues, which kind of, surprised me that, so many different vulnerabilities when it comes to climate change as well. And, this is not something that is framed as a coastal issue, but in, kind of a generalized, like you said, framing. But in the interest of time, Dr. Kurup, if I can, jump to the next question, wherein, of course, you can refer to some of these, what, in addition to what Naina mentioned about the various policy regulatory issues, we have quite a bit of regulations, but it's also about effective implementation and the framing, as she mentioned. But, one particular framework that the Indian government and also local governments seem to be really keen on is the blue economy framework. Where sustainability, economy, all these issues can sort of come together. So, of course, issues of ecotourism or, other things that can be promoted as part of the blue economy framework. And somewhere this question of, balancing between the economy and the marine biodiversity sustainable use of ocean resources and coastal biodiversity. So, is there a model of co-benefits that really can can be promoted as part of this blue economy framework, which will also be supportive of the tourism or the growing tourism interest or industry as such?
Well, thanks, Danshi, and thanks, Naina. I think I'll just take the thread from Naina's, which mentioned about the biodiversity part of it. So let me come back to why do we need blue economy? Why do we need a framework when so many other frameworks exist? I mean, I'm just posing it openly. Is it that, and its economy, so where does the economic interest lead to? That's the first thing. And blue is obviously the opening up of ocean resources, especially the deep sea, high sea resources, and which can really, and that is considered in the sense of a security of the nation. I think this whole emergence comes from securing, say, a certain dominance across several aspects. It could even include defense security. It could include mining resources, access to that, because we have to look at it from the global context, how it functions in that sense. Global blue economy is being pitched up, but the original idea of the blue economy was obviously, when we look at it, is from Gunter Pauly's thing, and where this whole notion is entirely different. The whole notion of blue economy, the way he has used the terminology, is entirely different. It is about innovating. It is about cooperating, collaborating, making it simpler, and so on and so forth. I somehow hope that those aspects would still come in as an approach, as in the basic design, when we still have the blue economy framework. This aspect is still, I would say, to several of us, a concept. I don't think it is still as it's a program, well-laid program where things are all emerging and it's very clarity. So one of the basic things that I think I feel is to have more consultations, more deliberations, discussion on this whole framework on blue economy, and it could be across all the levels, which would then mean that what is our real aspiration and what is it that can be leveraged from this particular framework. And importantly, it also kind of looks at the conflict situations being addressed. There are multiple users and there are multiple interests, and the space domains are very less. Further, the climate change, as you mentioned, will have its own issues of increasing vulnerabilities and all. And there is obviously the marginalization of the local communities in these whole aspects. So what is their say? How do we bring that voices to be heard? How do we bring those things to be coming up, resonating with blue economy framework and concepts, and it comes in. Therefore, in that sense, I think there is a huge scope, at least for co-management of coastal areas in our country. The CRZ, for example, there's a line, if you see, there is a coastal CVCA, critical vulnerable coastal areas. The entire coast of Gujarat, the Ratnagiri, Achara on this side, the Godavari, the Gulf of Mannar, so many aspects are considered by law, by the notification itself, as critical vulnerable coastal area. But then the idea there is who is critical, who is vulnerable, and therefore what is their say in that, and the managerial aspects which comes out of it, which means in such areas, at least to begin with, can we think about co-management as an important aspect, where there are possibilities of the panchayat and the municipal councils. Already they are doing it in certain fashion, but it is a more well laid out sustainable coastal sort of a design and approach to this thing, that I think, say, in policy is something, intervention which is possible to demonstrate that how do you do co-management in CVC areas, at least for the beginning. In terms of tourism, we have much lead. The G20 discussions, it has the Goa roadmap, and I think that's a very good framework to look at and develop it further, because that kind of also helps bring back the power, or that back to the panchayats. And as Manaina was saying, this Biodiversity Management Act, that is an act. The CRZ is a notification, so it will still continue to have its own modification as it goes along. There is also this idea of having a Fisheries Act, for example. It's a strong urge. There's a strong requirement or a strong need, also felt need. So and that need comes because of some guarantees. I mean, you don't have a immediate disruptive sort of development, which just leads to, not only people being there, but it's also the damage to the ecosystem itself. So there are one aspect is to see what can be an act. So if we can build on the Biodiversity Act, for example, there are these BMCs. So how can we put in the resources and the capacities, for example, in that to bring out the actual essence, which will then drive all these ecotourism aspects, because ecotourism cannot come out right from just a particular policy system. It has to have certain, what is the immediate act which supports, for example, ecotourism or certain things. And when we look into Biodiversity Act, we tremendously feel there is a lot of scope and power in it. But then the resources and investments, especially at the local level, because that is much required. And then as we go ahead with our conversations, we'll see that there are a lot of technological scope to address and bring those things, including citizen science and participatory design. Now, in the Blue Flag program that I work in, initial designs were all kind of top down. They were all templates which were just there. But we have now emerged out. We have had examples, like say example in Chal Beach in Kerala, in Kannur. There the Panchayat and the self-help group, the Kudumbashri, basically do it with the support of the tourism department. It doesn't require any heavy infrastructure, actually. The notion is to have a simple, safe beach, important toilets, for example, the basic facilities, and that's it. And have a good natural biodiversity and good space for thing, and respect the tradition. So you can have all these activities going parallelly. It doesn't have an exclusivity factor where fishes are not allowed in a certain zone and therefore tourism will not be allowed, or that both can't coexist. We desperately need such models. We desperately need to showcase that these things can happen. Tourists would be really happy. I wouldn't say even visitors, to learn what is those traditional systems. I'm sure that of thousands and lakhs of tourists who might be visiting the beach, even as they might be eating the fish, they might be really, I think that curiosity to how did it come to their dish, what net caught it, how was the fisher who caught it, what was the knowledge base around it. That itself is a major scope for us to bring demand to ecotourism. I wouldn't say ecotourism, but cultural rich and that thing. And therefore, immediately, where does the knowledge base rise? It lies again at the traditional, local communities. And therefore, there is a situation which can be dealt with, I think, right now. And also, I think the rights for the customary rights and the tenurial rights needs to be mapped. In the CRZ, there is an important aspect called the coastal zone management plans, basically the planning activity. How do we see more participation, especially of local representations, into it? There is a good model of the National Coastal Research Institute, NCCR, in Chennai, where they have this model or methodology where they start mapping the coastal spaces along with, I mean, I think even fishers are able to do it, proper scientific manner, and where you can map out where is your, boating space, your parking space, the net mending space, so many so forth. In fact, I think it can map out even the smallest of the mangroves and the sand dunes. It can become more micro level. Granularity will increase. I mean, and then if it can be merged with this, there will be a larger ownership and possibility of really having a an all citizen owned, map or a planning tool which is there. I think that is where we need to, there is a high possibility. And to do this, to do all of this, I think education as such and sustainability education as such would have to come in, because then that drives the necessity for having such a policy. It's not just policy or frameworks or models that will do, but these are small examples from the coast that can showcase and that can show that this is possible to do. Example, I take again Chal. I mean, across the Maharashtra coast recently, I see a lot of the panchayats there, for example, and the municipal council there having interest. And in that sense, if we can take some of our own models, some more benchmarks, we don't have those benchmarks to look at. We might have, say, SDGs, for example, as larger goals and all. But for the tourism sector, what could be the those indicators? And I think the G20 framework has a lot of good, powerful indicators. Something can also emerge from the local context also. Once we have those essential indicators lying there, I think it becomes a cue to pursue it and then reach that goal. So I think, yeah, I would basically frame it in that aspect. A largely participatory consultative model, which can drive strong ownership to beach spaces. And I think bringing out our culture and the rich heritage that we have to build on that. That is highly possibility for India. Yeah.
Yeah, and that reminds me, like, how I think also what Naina mentioned in the beginning, thinking of coastal areas, beaches as some sort of wilderness, and not really thinking about the socio-ecological aspects. So we need to look at it through the socio-ecological lens, so that we see that these are not like separate, separate zones, and there should be that synergy as far as tourism is concerned, or community led management of resources and many other things that come in. And Naina, there's a question from the audience, and also I think this was something that I wanted to raise to you anyway, with regard to communities and the role of communities in ecotourism and sustainable ecotourism. And if you can tell us a little bit about like successful examples. This is a question from KV Thomas from Cochin. And the question is, how can ecotourism or marine tourism protect habitat or biodiversity, and how can this be attained by taking local communities into confidence? And I think this is a very important question, also considering what Dr. Kurup mentioned earlier about how participatory approaches that also ensures ownership is very important for these ventures to really be successful in the long term. Yeah, over to you.
I would actually, I think Dr. Kurup has given a great example, and maybe after I speak, he can also explain the Kerala blue flag example in a little bit more detail. I think at the center of what is just tourism, sustainable tourism in all senses, not just environmentally, but also economically and socially sustainable tourism. I think we need to understand that we need to shift our focus from greater wealth generation to better distribution of wealth. And for that, I couldn't have put it better, as Dr. Kurup said, that communities are at the heart of this, and ensuring equity when it comes to benefits of tourism is important. I think we can boast this of the tourism sector. We actually have great examples from tourism sector, and we've had many people set up very successful community-based or community-driven and community-led enterprises, or even at village levels these have been set up. I don't have too many examples of very successful examples from the coast, but I can give a very interesting examples from the Himalayas, which the Uttarakhand region, which is the Himalayan Arc homestay initiative. So this started out from the one panchayat of one particular village in Uttarakhand, and they were facing a problem of out-migration because of several reasons. There's a lot of economic distress, and people were leaving the village to go out to earn their income, and women were left back in the village. And the one panchayat also, like, combining the need for conservation of the forest with trying to start programs that are economically beneficial as well, enrolled women from that village in a homestay program. And over the years, they've managed to have a very successful program where the benefits are equally distributed. It is held within the local governance system. Benefits are equally distributed among several households of the village. They've also, over the years, managed to have additional smaller ventures that provide food or handicrafts or locally grown agricultural produce that feed into this tourism itself. And one of the important aspects of that tourism tourism program is actually that they were very keen on looking at the numbers that they can handle. And this is from a conservation point of view. You cannot handle more than, you don't want to displace existing livelihoods. You don't want to impact the water resources, the food resources of that area, and affect regular life that is outside of tourism, but you also want the income from tourism. And this is where I think we need to look at tourism as bringing in not alternative, it's not an alternative livelihood, but it's an additional livelihood. It's an additional source of income, and fishers for a long time have been raising this as well, that what they need is not alternative sources, but they need additional sources. And that's how we can look at tourism. And one very important part of tourism is also that scholars of tourism have for a long time raised concerns about the volatility of tourism. And if you look at one very famous model called the tourism area life cycle model, it talks about the death of tourism. Butler talks about the death of tourism eventually. And to safeguard from this, what you need is diversification. You can't have tourism as the only source of income in any place. You need multiple sources of income, of which tourism could be one. And I think that when there are spaces for communities to participate in management and planning of tourism, I think it automatically will ensure that other sources of livelihood are not sacrificed for the sake of tourism. And some of the other examples in which states have managed to push this very well is actually the responsible tourism model in Kerala. I think community participation, ensuring well-being of workers within the tourism also is kind of something that is looked at carefully in the responsible tourism model. Something that I think they are constantly striving to innovate and make better as with the newer models of responsible tourism as well. And you also have examples like Sikkim, where several stakeholders have come together and the state has taken the responsibility to try and bring out sustainability within the tourism concept, the ecologically sensitive tourism, and bring in measures and policies to push that forward. The thing about ensuring local community participation is that a lot of it is actually, I am a lawyer, so I speak a lot from the legal framework. A lot of it is actually there in our legal framework, but I think empowerment is what is missing, in the sense that gram panchayats, town municipalities have tax. They have powers to levy taxes. They have powers to regulate commercial ventures. They have powers to levy any additional fees that they want to. But many local governments are not able to take this initiative because of a lack of knowing how to do it. I think capacity is a huge problem here. Knowledge and capacity can be built. Also, explicitly devolving powers of tourism to gram panchayats. It's something Karnataka did when they changed their Gram Panchayat Act in 2014. Making tourism an explicit subject that is debated and discussed within Gram Sabha meetings or talked about by the Gram Panchayats. I think all of these measures actually make a difference. And capacity has a huge role to play here.
Yeah, thanks, Naina, for that. So just taking forward from there, I think, we are already at 12, so maybe we can just jump into the wrap-up comments, where I think, Dr. Kurup, if you can also, you already mentioned some of these strategies that we need to adopt and how do we make it more participatory. Are there lessons? And of course, Naina mentioned very beautiful examples from the Himalayan region, which can be emulated possibly in coastal areas, especially when it comes to promoting ecologically sensitive tourism. Are there also lessons, say, from other countries, especially considering, coastal tourism is something that is very popular in some of the Indian Ocean countries, and many other countries that have long coastlines, just like India. So just thinking about also, what are the kind of innovations that we need? Like, is there a role for, say, technology, digital technologies or other forms of technologies or social innovations that could help sort of promote ecotourism? And if I can also club this question that has come from Mr. K.B. Thomas once again, that is directed at you, Dr. Kuru. How can nature, people, art and culture be properly synergized for ideal ecotourism? And he's also mentioned the example of the Veli Tourist Center in Kerala. And, if you can comment on that, maybe, that provides an example, maybe that is also interesting to sort of wrap up the session from your end, and then I'll move to Nayan after that.
Sure. I'll take up the question from Mr. Thomas, and I think that's the central key to it. How do we make our beach spaces or coastal spaces, it might matter any space, a learning center, a skilling center which rejuvenates after you have visited it? That's the actual power that we are not kind of leveraging from that. So like, say, I can take the example of the Blue Flag program because I work with it and also with the associated with the global network. Now, why does this program, what is so important that we love about this program is one of the criteria to that is that the space or the tourist space or the Blue Flag space has to function as an environmental educational center. And it just not meaning some sort of drawing competition, taking out some rallies, and not something like that. But what is that effort in that management, in that beach management, to ensure that your visitor experiences something much more fundamental, much more deeper? It could be as simple as playing with the sand. It could be taking a beach walk, looking at the biodiversity, learning two things about, say, solid waste management. This is the power that is possible to do, and that, as Mr. Thomas said, the Valley Tourist Center. Now, otherwise, what will happen is these become very popular recreational centers. And what do you find on these centers? Boat rides, animal rides, and stuff like that. It just becomes an adventure it's not even adventure, it's just like a thrill which you can have anywhere outside. But what is the scope? Does it inspire you to, like, say, for example, learn about swimming, learn about first aid and rescue? So in Blue Flag beaches, at least what we have been able to do, I can take the example of Golden Beach in Puri. It has lined out around 50 activities, the beach management committee there, over a period of time, engaging some of the local educators and the staff itself. It's not that we have to depend a lot of externalities. The local staff who are basically from the local community coming in and then doing a half-an-hour session or 1 hour session with these family visitors. What happens is the family gets attracted. You are then attracting quality tourism. And that this issue of over tourism that we now face is actually not being responsible enough to that site. And therefore, that's how the Kerala comes in, needed to promote responsible tourism. When we say tourism, we really want to say good tourist, quality tourist who wants to experience these aspects. Therefore, then the cultural things and those things can emerge. If there is no point in going to a beach destination, not being able to even taste the local cuisine. It needs to be what is the local circuit that is there, or the cultural heritage, or an art performance. What is it there? And if we can then recreate those public spaces, as Naina was saying, the commons, it's not just the livelihood, it's a celebratory space. It is where all our country citizens come in. They get to learn something more about the specific area. And I think tourism is something that enables that, a greater ownership and pride for your space. I think the moment we bring in those aspects or really work towards it, there will be much win-win situations emerging. We might really, and I think here I also want to point out about the role of architects in this whole thing, because the entire tourism large-scale projects come out through empaneled architects. And what is the blueprint, or what is the design aspect, what is the consultative aspects, inputs that they have taken in from the local community? That is not really very, it's not very obvious. And as Naina was mentioning, all these consultations, other things comes as a commenting mechanism towards the fag end. By that time, you have a lot of other conflicts arising. It's much better to have participatory design, or at least in tourism projects, being able to have a say in what elements come there. And therefore, I would say what enables that is in this global programs, essentially these are certification or award programs. So these have well laid out benchmarks, which we can also create. That is like a guiding roadmap. The moment you start pursuing it, for example, life safety, I need to have not just lifeguards, but can I train the local youths? We would like to see women lifeguards, for example. what stops us? It's a culture which we can bring about in life safety and rescue, to learn about how do you do immediate first aid for any space. It could be about learning about how the waste management is being done at certain spaces. What can also trigger through these smaller packets spaces is that if there is a requirement, say for example the STPs or the FSTPs on that area, it can trigger the requirement for that. Maharashtra, in some villages, Raigad, for example, we see over the weekend, the number of visitors are equal to the population of the village. What does this mean? The resource on the existing property, this will be there. So this requires a larger intervention to see that what is happening to the whole space. I'm talking in terms of the ecological space, but then it's also an equal opportunity, so that how much of educational opportunity do we have, how much of opportunity do we have to kind of influence the responsible tourism behavior of these tourists. I think not only the site gets benefited, when they go back, it becomes a much better felt tourist field trip or whatever that is. So I think that's the main thing. In amongst the states, I would say Sikkim and Kerala really are, I think, lead quite. There are a lot of other smaller examples, but I think if we were to look at from a governance point of view, and even in terms of how citizens have owned up to that whole area of tourism, I think these two to really come up. Coming back to, I think a small comment on Valley. I've been in Trivandrum also. So definitely it's a great destination. But what do you see there is something where we cannot have people go into the sea. That's because of the nature of it. But is it possible, was it possible that if we had done a different design right up on the coast, had something differently done, would it been possible to have more people being able to go into the coast? That is something I would just frame my thing that in the pursuit of beautification or creating a lot of infrastructure, let's not lose the simple fundamental elements of nature. And therefore, there is also another great opportunity is about accessibility. These designs have to also, we need to look at it from the universal accessibility standards point of view. The moment that triggers off, every person would know that can a wheelchair or a disabled person also be using the same toilet facility that I use? Can they also go and access the beachfront? Can they also go and maneuver around as easily as we can do? I think these are critical aspects. So design of a certain destination has to have a larger overarching, elements, especially certifications or benchmarks or standards. If we can bring in those aspects, I think the richness of that area, the cultural aspects and other things can certainly come up very, much more richly. Yeah, I think I'll.
Yeah. Thank you. Naina, your wrap-up comments for this session. Yeah.
I think very few small things, and what we need is actually several stakeholders coming together. We need to have governments at different levels. We need to have tour operators. Tourists are a very important part of this whole any transformation that we want, and small business owners as well. But at the center of it should also be communities who are affected by any development that happens in their homes, in their areas. That is one thing. And also a small side comment with respect to technology. I think it's possible to bring in any newness actually. How it can be beneficial will really depend on the vision with which it's brought in. It's possible to marry the somewhat different aspects of conservation and tourism together through technology as well. And it really depends on how we do it. And just as an example, at Dakshin, we have started something called a reef log program, which is encouraging recreational divers to collect their observations, and it's a citizen science kind of an initiative that marries both tourism and conservation efforts. And we are hoping that it'll have it'll help us actually look at data from a different way, and it influences divers to look at the the destination, which is a sea bed that they are interested in a different manner. So I think it's possible that technology can bring in some of these transformations, but it really depends on how we use it and for what reasons that we use it.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much. I know 1 hour is not enough to discuss such a vast and such a complex issue, because the way you have brought out different connections to this issue of coastal tourism and ecology, and connecting it to the socio-economic and the transitions also that we are seeing, right? So we are looking at jobs in a different way, technologies, of course, having a say as well in how these transitions are happening. So, and of course, we are looking at, as Dr. Kurup mentioned, different impacts of climate change, and many other issues that also combine to, as Naina mentioned in the beginning, it's a wicked problem, right? So we call climate change as a wicked problem, but we are increasingly entering a world where everything is becoming a wicked problem, because it's so interconnected with each other, and it's becoming not just systemic, but it's something with cascading impacts and with compound impacts. The policy, regulatory landscape, or technologies are not enough to address the challenges that we are facing. So just to wrap up, I think we started off by just talking about the coastal, the impacts of tourism on, as far as habitat destruction is concerned, biodiversity loss, and especially with the kind of beautification projects or the design, as Dr. Kurup mentioned, this is something that we need to look at in terms of also the behavioral aspects of tourists, which is very important, as he mentioned in one of his answers, that it's also about tourists demanding a certain thing, which is very important to for this transformation to happen as to how we approach tourism. To something like what Naina mentioned, it's so important is to look at it in terms of commons or community commons, and especially looking at the resource dependent communities, and not really looking at it just in terms of the economic benefits, and looking at it in terms of equity in the distribution of benefits. And I think that is an important point that was raised in the discussion. We also discussed various regulations, and the fact is that as is the case with most other policies, we have a lot of policies in place, we have a lot of regulations in place. Of course, the framing and how these policies are effectively implemented, and if there are enough safeguards, and if it is participatory enough, and at what stage is it participatory. And I think that's an important point you raised, that instead of bringing the communities towards the end, it is important to start the process with, as stakeholder participation. And I think that's an important point. And also looking at what are the different examples, and I think both of you brought about many very good examples, and also like innovations that can happen in terms of policy interventions, something that just targets the fishing communities who are already affected a great deal by many of these changes happening. And I think I really love the term that you use, Naina, like, using this as a celebratory space rather than, not, sorry, it was Dr. Kurup who mentioned it. I'm sorry. Yeah. So one of you may, and I think that is such an important point to raise, especially for people. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy the beaches, and I know what it means, and I live in an area where we have a blue flag beach in Padubidri, and I'm in Manipal, so, and I've seen many crabs, so thankfully that gives me an indication that these beaches are still pristine, and I can I'm quite I'm quite lucky and maybe privileged to still have these beaches in that state, and I don't know how things are going to change though. So, I mean, I'll just leave it at that note. A lot of issues were raised, and I would, and also thank you to the audience for keeping yourself engaged with this discussion, and also for raising important questions. And of course, we would love to take up these discussion points later on as well, as part of this project, and as part of the, not this webinar series, but beyond this, which is something that CPPR is thoroughly committed to, I'm sure. So thank you once again for joining. I would give it back to Jofi now. Thank you.
Yeah. So as Dr. Dhanasri was rightly pointing out, 1 hour really doesn't do justice to this topic like this. So there's so much more we would like to discuss also. But since we are bound by the prescribed time slot, I think we'll have to wrap it here for now. I'd like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Shruti Group and Ms. Naina Udeshankar for their insightful and thought-provoking discussion speakers in this webinar. So your perspective and expertise enrich the conversation. I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Dhanasri Jairam for excellent moderation for this section. Her guidance and thoughtful questions helped steer the dialogue seamlessly and ensured a meaningful exchange of ideas. Thank you once again for being a part of this engaging and impactful section. CPPR extends our gratitude to the Asia Foundation for supporting us in this project in building our network for coastal think tanks in India. I also thank the CPPR team for organizing this webinar. And last but not least, I thank the audience for participating in our discussion for the day. Keep following our social media for more updates regarding ICTN project. With this, I conclude our webinar. Thank you and wishing each of you a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.